This video and lesson will conclude the book of 2 Kings with chapters 24 and 25. It will be taking place, of course, in Judah to the south. The king is Hezekiah, and they will be besieged by Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. Chapter 24, verse 1. In his days Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up, and Jehoiakim became his servant 3 years. Then he turned and rebelled against him. And we are told in Jeremiah 25:9 that the Lord had said that I will bring Nebuchadnezzar against Judah. Judah will pay for the wrongdoing and sinful ways. 2. And the Lord sent against him bands of the Chaldees, and bands of the Syrians, and bands of the Moabites, and bands of the children of Ammon, and sent them against Judah to destroy it, according to the word of the Lord, which he spake by his servants, the prophets. Now, God will use whomever he wishes to chastise. Under David, all of these persons were under David's thumb and also under Solomon. And here they are now sending marauding gangs against Judah. All of these persons who were at an earlier time conquered. 3. Surely at the commandment of the Lord came this upon Judah, them to remove them out of his sight for the sins of Manasseh, according to all that he did. And he did probably was the worst. And they are not being punished for him. They are being punished because they refused to make a turn, even under Josiah, who tried so very hard in a previous chapter to correct and redo and establish the worship of God. The people were simply playing church. They did not really change. 4. And also for the innocent blood that he shed. He filled Jerusalem with innocent blood, which the Lord would not pardon. In Jeremiah 15, the very first verse, the Lord tells him that even if Samuel and Moses besought reprieve from him, it would not be heard. 5. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoiakim and all that he did, are they not written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And yes, they are in 2 Chronicles chapter 36. So Jehoiakim slept with his fathers, and Jehoiachin his son reigned in his stead. 7. And the king of Egypt came not again any more out of his land, for the king of Babylon had taken from the river of Egypt unto the river of Euphrates all that pertained to the king of Egypt. So you have seen the king of Babylon has taken from the Nile to the Euphrates, and they can no longer lean on Egypt, and they were told not to anyway. 8. And Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months. and his mother's name was Nehushta, the daughter of Elnathan of Jerusalem. And that name means a piece of brass, and Jehoiachin means lion, and he evidently did not behave in a very lion-like fashion. Number 9. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, according to that all that his father had done. He continued. 10. At that time the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up against Jerusalem, and the city was besieged. Now, the besieging a city meant that it was totally surrounded, and no one got in, no food, no supplies, and no one escaped because it was totally surrounded. 12. And Jehoiachin, the king of Judah, went out to the king of Babylon, he and his mother, and his servants, and his princes, and his officers. And the king of Babylon took him in the 8th year of his reign. So essentially, he has just gone to surrender. And he was taken in the 8th. Will he act like a king and be allowed to be a pretend king and pay tribute? 13. And he carried out thence all the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house, and cut in pieces all the vessels of gold which Solomon king of Israel had made in the temple of the Lord, as the Lord had said. And he has taken now all of this brass and treasures out of the house of the Lord, and he has remember that how would Nebuchadnezzar know that all of these things existed? Back in the 20th chapter, we learned that Hezekiah showed him everything, and then the prophecy was to him that Babylon would take everything. That was God speaking to the prophet Isaiah. 14. And he carried away all Jerusalem, and all the princes, and all the mighty men of valor, even 10,000 captives, and all the craftsmen and smiths, and none remained save the poorest sort of the people of the land. So he's carried away the cream of the crop. He's carried away the leaders. He's carried away those who had special talent, and the chamberlains, and all of the important persons, and only the poor remain. 15. And he carried away Jehoiachin to Babylon, and the king's mother, and the king's wives, and his officers, and the mighty of the land. These carried he into captivity from Jerusalem to Babylon. 16. And all the men of might, the warriors, even 7,000, and craftsmen and smiths 1,000, and all that were strong and apt for war, even them the king of Babylon brought captive to Babylon. 17. And the king of Babylon made Mattaniah, his father's brother, king in his stead, and changed his name to Zedekiah, which means justice of Yah, or justice of God. So who made the king now? The king has been appointed by the king of Babylon, and not by God and not by genealogy. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Hamutah, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah, and that Jeremiah is delineated there so as not to confuse us that she was the daughter of Jeremiah the prophet, a different Jeremiah. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, according to all that Jehoiakim had done. 20. Through the anger of the Lord, it came to pass in Jerusalem and Judah, until he had cast them out from his presence, that Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. Now, the prophet had been telling him to be a servant to Nebuchadnezzar. That was from God himself. And he has rebelled against the prophet, and that is equal to rebelling against God himself. Chapter 25 to conclude this book. And it came to pass in the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, in the 10th day of the month, that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came, he and all his host, against Jerusalem, and pitched against it, and they built forts round about it. Those forts you can take to mean towers. They built ways that they could climb up and look over to observe, and also to possibly use archery to attack. 2. And the city was besieged unto the 11th year of King Zedekiah. So for 2 years it was besieged, which tells you something about the strength of Jerusalem, that it was able to have the supplies and the wherewithal to survive 2 years, because no food is coming in and no one is going out to bring anything in. 3. And on the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine prevailed in the city, and there was no bread for the people in the land. And they are reaping the curses laid out in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28. They are fallen away from God, and they are receiving curses instead of his blessings. He has turned his back. 4. And the city was broken up, and all the men of war fled by night by the way of the gate between 2 walls, which is by the king's garden. Now the Chaldees were against the city round about, and the king went the way toward the plain. So they've had a breaking out, some warriors, and the king has fled. And I should have already told you that Chaldee, when you see that word Chaldee, it is Babylon, and they spoke a dialect of the Chaldee language. And if you have a Strong's Concordance, when you look at his work in the Old Testament, it will give you words that were in Hebrew and Chaldee. 5. And the army of the Chaldees pursued after the king and overtook him in the plains of Jericho, and all his army were scattered from him. So Zedekiah is captured. 6. So they took the king and brought him up to the king of Babylon to Riblah, and they gave judgment upon him. I believe at the beginning of this lesson, I hope I did not say that Hezekiah was reigning. It was Zedekiah. Hezekiah came 3 kings before, and Hezekiah was a good king. 6. So they took the king and brought him up to Babylon to Riblah, and they gave judgment upon him. Now, giving judgment upon him means that he was had a judgment spoken over him. In other words, they are going to say what happens. And they slew the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes, and put out the eyes of Zedekiah, and bound him with fetters of brass, and carried him to Babylon. Okay, the sons have been slain, but he also had some daughters, and those daughters, we learn, were taken by Jeremiah to Egypt, and later they made their way to the British Isles, and they took with them what is known as the Stone of Scone, and it was in Scotland, and then it was in England, and until recent times was under the coronation chair, and it had emblazoned upon it protector of the faith, and it was the stone on which Jacob laid his head when he had his dream. So the daughters of Zedekiah did escape, but the sons, and of course that would have been important genealogically because sons inherit and reign. 8. And in the 5th month, on the 7th day of the month, which is the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, servant of the king of Babylon, into Jerusalem. Now, this person you might think of as a person who is going to be a marshal. He was carry out and execute orders from the king of Babylon. 9. And he burnt the house of the Lord, and the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem, and every great man's house burnt he with fire. Anyone who had a house of any kind of fine structure, he burned, including the palace and all the wood, of course, of the temple. 10. And all the army of the Chaldees that were with the captains of the guard brake down the walls of Jerusalem round about. When the walls are gone, that city is gone. It didn't take very long to break them down, but it took a long time to build them. It will take, if they are rebuilt, and it will take a very long time to rebuild, and the city is now open to any marauder that might want in. 11. Now the rest of the people that were left in the city, and the fugitives that fell away to the king of Babylon, with the remnant of the multitude, did Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carry away. Now these would have been persons who deserted, and the remnant of whatever was left, and he took them captive. 12. But the captain of the guard left the poor of the land to be vine dressers and husbandmen. So these fortunate few who had nothing at least stayed in their own land, but they will garden and plant and grow grapes, and that will be food and supplies for Babylon. 13. And the pillars of brass that were in the house of the Lord, and the bases of the brazen sea that was in the house of the Lord, did the Chaldees break in pieces and carried the brass of them to Babylon. Now, those pillars would have been set by Solomon when the temple was built, and the bases, and that brazen sea was a brass vessel that would have been the size of a small swimming pool, because it was used to wash large animals that were to be sacrificed. This is a great deal of brass, and they have broken it up and carried it away. 14. And the pots and the shovels, the snuffers and the spoons, and all the vessels of brass wherewith they ministered, took them away. These are items that would have been in the temple for the worship services, and they have taken them. These were brass vessels. 15. And the fire pans and the bowls and such things as were gold in gold, and of silver in silver, the captain of the guard took away. All of these beautiful and important pieces that were used to carry out worship in the temple. 16. The two pillars, one sea, and the bases which Solomon had made for the house of the Lord, the brass of all these vessels was without weight. It weighed so much they could not weigh it, and we learn in Ezra that Cyrus, the king of Persia, who allowed them to go back, did return some of these things. And Jeremiah tells us that they also took those candlesticks. Uh, these these pillars would have been 18 cubits high. A cubit would be 18 inches, so 18 times 18, and then the chapiter on the top, we're going to learn in the next verse, was 3 cubits, and all of these were brass. 17, and we learn about these pillars and capiters, and those are those capiters you can think of as crowns up at the top. The height of one pillar was 18 cubits, and the capiter upon it was brass, and the height of the capiter 3 cubits, and the wreathed work and pomegranates upon the capiter round about, all of brass, and like unto these had the second pillar with wreathed work. And we remember when we studied about the building of the temple, how that they formed these pomegranates and these fancy pieces in clay, and then poured that molten brass in. Much work that went into the detail work in that temple. 18. And the captain of the guard took Sarai, the chief priest, and Zephaniah, the second priest, and the 3 keepers of the door. These are the Levites, the high priest, and the second priest, who would be helping in worship service, and then the doorkeepers, or those who allowed persons in and out of the temple as security guards. 19. And out of the city he took an officer that was set over the men of war, and 5 men of them that were in the king's presence, which were found in the city, and the principal scribe of the host, who mustered the people of the land, and 60 men of the people of the land that were found. So they found some landowners and some persons who were in the city and who had not been taken in this first carrying away. 20. And Nebuchadnezzar, captain of the guard, took these and brought them to the king of Babylon in Riblah. 21. And the king of Babylon smote them and slew them at Riblah in the land of Hamath. So Judah was carried away out of their land. 22. And as for the people that remained in the land of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had left, even over them he made Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan, the ruler. So he has set someone over them, and we learn that this Ahikam, we learn in Jeremiah 26 that this person supported Jeremiah and at one point saved his life. So if he supported Jeremiah, it's quite likely that this son Gedaliah did also. And when all the captains of the army, they and their men, heard the king of Babylon had made Gedaliah governor, they came to Gedaliah to Mizpah, even Ishmael, son of Nethaniah, and Johanan, the son of Kareah, and Serajah, the son of Tanhumeth, the Netophathite, and Jehazaniah, the son of Maacalathite, they and their man. So here we have these persons who were taken up to Gedaliah, went up to Gedaliah, and were with him. 24. And Gedaliah sware to them and to their man, and said unto them, Fear not to be the servants of the Chaldean. Dwell in the land, serve the king of Babylon, and it will be well with you. Who told him that? Jeremiah. That is what Jeremiah had told these persons, the kings. He said, be a servant to the king of Babylon. And this is how they will survive. 25. But it came to pass in the 7th month that Ishmael, the son of Nethaniah, the son of Elishama of the seed royal, came, and 10 men with him, and smote Gedaliah, that he died, and the Jews and the Chaldees that were with him at Mizpah. So here it is, royal seed, and they have killed Gedaliah, and that is the end of him. And all the people, both small and great, and the captains of the armies arose and came to Egypt, for they were afraid of the Chaldees. So they have gone to Egypt and to be under the protection. 27. And it came to pass in the 37th year of the captivity of Jehoiachin, king of Judah, in the 12th month, on the 7th and 20th day of the month, that Evil-Merodach, king of Babylon, in the year that he began to reign, did lift up the head of Jehoiachin, king of Judah, out of prison. So he has led him out of prison. This would be the son of Nebuchadnezzar, the heir to the throne. 28, and he spake kindly to him, and set his throne above the throne of the kings that were with him in Babylon. These were other kings from other nations that had been taken into captivity, and so he has the highest, most place among these kings. 29, and he changed his prison garments, and he did eat bread continually before him all the days of his life. And his allowance was a continual allowance given him by the king, a daily rate for every day and all the days of his life. So this Jehoiakim has been taken out of prison, and he's been given an allowance, and he is eating at the king's table, and this is the end of Second Kings. Second Kings and First Kings, First and Second Samuel, all of those are called the Book of Kings. And when the translators took it into Greek, the Greek language took up so much more room than Hebrew that it became known as First, Second Samuel, and Kings, because when they got to the end of the scroll, it ended and they began another scroll and it became Second. So that is how we happen to have First and Second Samuel and First and Second Kings. Thank you for participating in these studies. This lesson is an outreach of the Essex Methodist Church in Essex, Missouri, and the Crossroads Global Methodist Church in Dexter, Missouri.